It's now time to talk Kansas City Chiefs football on the Ourlads Football Network, here on the Ourlads Football YouTube channel. And when we talk Kansas City Chiefs football, we're now talking with our newest addition. We've already spoken to him, Charles Goldman, conference managing editor for A to Z Sports. We had an opportunity to preview the draft, and now, of course, it's time to recap it with this video. So, Charles, thanks again for joining us here on the network and the channel.
Thanks for having me back, Greg.
You got it. So
it must have made a good impression because you're having me back.
Absolutely. That's the way it works, right? So
Yeah.
the trip to the White House actually is over. Matter of fact, just concluded a few minutes ago as the time we are recording this on Friday. And, I guess that's getting a little bit sort of like Forrest Gump. I'm sure there's like a nice little video you guys can come up with there, as often as Forrest Gump made it to the White House, and he was kind of getting bored of it. Maybe you guys will probably get bored of visiting the White House after winning the Super Bowl as often as you guys have recently. So,
hey, I mean, we back to back, and now we're going for the three-peat. So, one more year, and then maybe we can surrender that to somebody else. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Well, it should be a lot harder this year if all these quarterbacks in the AFC stay healthy. But hey, you know what? Who cares, right? As long as you win the Super Bowl and you play the way that the Chiefs have played and coach the way they've coached and have the quarterback that they have, this is just something that you relish as a fan. This is a great time to be a Chiefs fan. But still, it's all about replenishing every year in the draft, new players, and especially the young ones. Overall, people can say what they want about Andy Reid as a coach. And I remember a few years ago, the talk was about Andy Reid was basically, he was like the man that was doing everything. This is Andy Reid's team. And, they have a general manager, but Andy Reid's really the one that's making all the decisions. But I'm sure he still is making a lot of them. But I would think it's more than anything time to recognize that it takes more than even just a head coach or a quarterback. And that's where it comes with great scouting, the decisions on draft day and so forth. And hopefully they've got another good class and another underrated class, which I think they do. I think they have a very good class. I know you have a good grade on them. I have a good grade on them. Matter of fact, I thought the entire AFC West actually did a really good job in the draft this season, but the Chiefs just keep on cooking.
Yeah, they pick their spots with these guys. They've really found a great way to kind of balance need and finding these guys in the draft. And I think that's one thing that a lot of teams can kind of learn from. Like, it's okay to have needs. You just have to have the ability to kind of adjust on the fly in the draft to be able to address those needs, right? But a lot of teams, they like to, and I know the Chiefs like to, position themselves so they don't have to feel that they have to pick based on need. And sometimes there are some external factors that play into it. A lot of people were Rashee Rice stuff taking place this offseason. Is it going to be kind of like what happened in the past with Mecole Hardman when there were allegations that came out against Tyreek Hill, right? And it felt kind of like the Chiefs were reacting to that almost in the draft. But I think this year, even though they ended up selecting a wide receiver early, I think it was different. I think that wide receiver was always that top need and always that on the top of their radar, something they were going to address early, no matter what happened, regarding another player during the offseason.
100%. And we take a look now here as I pop up the Ourlads.com depth chart for the Kansas City Chiefs. And you can see right there all the players in orange. Those are all the rookies. So you've got a lot of players, including, of course, the free agents that came up after the draft that were added on offense. And they're the defensive players. We'll get into that, special teams and so on. But, let's actually – oh, by the way, before we get started, I just want to remind everybody, not only if you're a Chiefs fan, but just a general fan in general of the work we do here, make sure to subscribe to the channel. So you can return if you are a Chiefs fan at some point at training camp in the preseason, because Charles is going to be back and we're going to have an opportunity to preview 2024 and go over how the depth chart is looking when we have an opportunity to find out more with camp and so forth, because this is just the start of things. Would you say that, because just taking a look at the depth chart here, Ourlads has just one player, big surprise, their first player, listed as a starter. So when week one comes around, do you think that that's what it's going to be? That the Chiefs at this point in time, really, as far as this draft is concerned, and I shouldn't even say week one. Let's just say, I should actually say maybe the end of the season. Do you think Worthy will probably still end up as the only guy considered like a true starter, or somebody that's getting significant snaps? Or could you see more than just Worthy being a key part of the team this season?
Yeah, I honestly can see the first 4 picks really playing those starting roles and slotting in as starter-esque, I should say, right? I would say the one who actually probably has the best chance right now is Kingsley Suamataia, the left tackle. Just yesterday, our offensive line coach described the left tackle competition as wide open. And we, kind of saw that in practice because they rotated a lot of guys in at that spot, including, someone I put you onto last time we spoke. Chu Godric was starting at left, and they actually moved Wanyas into left guard for some snaps there. With Joe Thuney out of practice, he's still rehabbing the pec injury. So, it's still very early, right? OTAs are a time for experimentation. You're finding out like what your guys can do, what they can do well, where they can kind of slot in for you. I don't know that, Wanya Morris's future is at left guard, but, knowing whether or not he can play that's important. Knowing how Chu Godric handles going up against, the opposing, first team defense as a starting left tackle, that's important because, we were talking about him last year. This is a guy that has never played professional football until the first preseason game last year. So, but, obviously, Kingsley is someone that they drafted with that left tackle job in mind. Whether that happens this season or in the future is going to be up to him, and, how quickly he can kind of adapt and adjust and learn the playbook. And I really think that's where he's at right now. It was kind of funny. Andy Heck, the offensive line coach, made kind of a funny joke about when he was a player coming out. He had a lot more difficult time learning pass protection because he was coming from like a wing T style offense, you ground and pound, run the football. Nowadays, guys like Kingsley are much better suited coming out to pass protect because they come from that type of offense already. The college game is very much predicated on passing the football. So I think he's going to be ready in that regard. It's going to be, how quickly can they get him up to speed between the ears, and how ready is he to, contribute also in the run game too, because that's a big part of it. And, obviously they're not going to figure that out until training camp comes around and they can put the pads on. But I think Kingsley is probably an even better position right now than Worthy to contribute early and right away as a starter. I mean, I guess Worthy is someone that the Chiefs like also as a return specialist.
Okay.
So he's someone who could maybe get like a starting punt returner type of job for Kansas City, and maybe more of a gadget type of role as a receiver early on.
Just get the ball in his hands. Yep.
Exactly. And, that's an important role in Andy Reid's offense, but I don't know if you necessarily would classify that as a starter. I mean, obviously a lot of it's going to depend too on, what happens with Rashee Rice. Is Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore, are they still on the team, or if some of these other guys stepped up? A name that on the depth chart here that I'd tell you to move up right now, just after some OTAs hype, Nico Remigio. He's standing out quite a bit. Someone who potentially could land a spot on the roster if he keeps things up the way he has so far.
Okay, and because that is, if we just even start with the receivers with Worthy and the pick, taking a look at the receiver, the depth chart, it does look wide open to me. Watson's a guy that is, hey, he's a steady veteran, and as long as we don't have, until we find the right guys, he'll do. That's how I take it, that they're looking at Watson is he'll be okay. We can count on him to do this, that, and the other thing, but we're looking for better. But until that happens, so what that means is it's open. And then you mentioned Moore. I mean, look, at this point, it's been a major disappointment. So who knows if he's ever going to get it? I can't even believe Tony's still on the team, to tell you the truth. So, but you would know that more than me. So that doesn't look like to me that it's a wide open room, even for, say, that true number 4 spot, which I got to believe right now is Watson's over Moore. You're telling me that Remigio has the opportunity at this point in time, that is, if he has a really good summer, that he might be able to fit that role.
Yeah, and the nice thing too is he had a really good year last year. Had like 71 yards in his first preseason game. Comes back the next week at training camp practice, makes a incredible athletic grab in training camp, and at the same time injures himself, ends up on season-ending injury reserve, gets the red shirt year, and now he's back. He's hungry once more. And look, you mentioned it with Watson, right? The Chiefs had him on a 2-year deal. Last year, it was difficult to get out of that deal. This year, there's no dead money. They can cut ties. So I think that's something to keep in mind too. As these guys get out there and compete, that it is very much so anyone's game. A guy like Justin Ross, who had a really good offseason last year and then just kind of disappeared once the regular season arrived. Is he a guy who can step it up? Cornell Powell hasn't got a lot of opportunities, but he's been very consistent during his time in Kansas City. And I have to wonder, will he get some chances? Montreal Washington's doing some nice things with the second team, catching some long passes from Carson Wentz. So, I mean, there are definitely some guys who could push some of these guys who are kind of fringe players for a spot. Yep. And then the other thing you have to consider, like with Worthy, is special teams value, because this year with the new kick return rules and whatnot, guys who play special teams and fill those roles on special teams, they're going to have more value than the guys who don't. So that's also something to consider.
But by the way, I know we're having a little bit of a connection issue here and there, just so you know. But for draft fantasy fans, what do you think? Because again, and I know it's early, because this is something maybe for the next conversation. But Rice, how confident are you that everything's just going to be okay, and that hey, you know what? I'm going to draft Rashee Rice on my team this year at a certain area in the draft. I don't know if you play fantasy or not, but what would you say to them?
I think it's just it's interesting. I would obviously monitor his his rankings and whatnot, or what his average draft position is, because I do think he's going to play at some point this next season. I don't think that it's going to be a situation where he indefinitely ends up on the commissioner's exempt list or whatnot. I honestly, I've heard a lot of people who are kind of saying 6-8 games, half the season, what have you. I would be surprised if it's going to be that. Obviously, the second incident turned out to be kind of a nothing, right? The first incident is extremely serious, right? However, I feel like if the NFL were to hand out like a 6 or 8 game suspension, I feel like there is precedent for him to come and have the NFLPA represent him and appeal a suspension like that and get it down significantly. So I just think that I think that the league's going to kind of fall maybe on 3 to 4 games for Rice at the end of the day. And I think that'll be fair, just based on the fact that he's kind of a first time offender here, and this is just it's obviously something that you don't want to see that happen. You want to make sure that you're treating that properly, but at the same time, there is that precedent, like I said, with things that have happened in the past. And we do know that Roger Goodell and the NFL has kind of, strayed from that from time to time and can kind of do what they want. But I don't think that's going to be a situation here.
Okay. Yeah, we're looking at our fantasy partners at Draft Sharks, their latest rankings, and their number one receiver on Kansas City right now is Xavier Worthy. So now this is Dynasty. So yes, that's obviously a little bit different. But still,
and I think that's I think that's the right call too. I would rank him ahead of Rice in Dynasty rankings. Just the speed. I mean, we've seen what Patrick Mahomes can do with, the passing attack, just throw the ball for a guy to run under it and catch it. So I feel like, potentially, if I had to choose one guy, it would be Worthy. He's going to have the 5th-year option too. So, you at least know he's going to be in the system probably there for 5 years at a minimum. And with the way the wide receiver market is now, I think they'll probably take that 5th-year option instead of trying to pay him a contract. But it's just I think Worthy, very, very extremely talented. The big thing that keeps coming up about him too is that he's a smart kid.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that's something I think that the Chiefs value and have shown that they're looking for out of the wide receiver position. I think they saw what kind of transpired with Rashee Rice last season, and how he was able to pick up the offense and really have an impact quickly. And I think they've kind of learned how they can, the types of players they're looking for, the types of guys who can come in and maybe replicate that. And I think Worthy's someone like that. And, I know that there's a lot of anxiety right now because he hasn't been practicing at OTAs. He had 1.5 practices and, pulled up lame, had a hamstring. And, people are kind of concerned that he hasn't been back at practice yet.
Okay.
However, it's a minor thing. Andy Reid called it a tweak. They're just holding him out to be safe. They want him on the field for the part of the offseason that matters. Yeah. I don't know if he'll be back for OTA practices next week. I'd actually probably guess he's not. I would say mandatory minicamp is what they're aiming for right now to get him on the field for that.
Okay.
And that'll be kind of the thing that'll springboard him into training camp, which is really where they want him, on the field and working and getting that chemistry with Patrick Mahomes. But doesn't mean he's not working right now. They got him on the side every day at practice, and they've got the wide receiver coach or an assistant right there next to him. And, they'll have him on a given play. They're like, okay, you're the zebra receiver on this play. What's your responsibility? What are you supposed to do on this play? And he regurgitates that information to the coach, right or wrong. He'll get the answer from the coach and, have to go hit the playbook again. But
Yeah.
He's taking these mental reps, even though he's not out there on the field. And that can be valuable too. I do think there is maybe a little bit more value to being out there and actually, going through the rep and running it yourself and
sure
and what have you. But I do think that, that there is some good things happening, even though he's not.
And then we're going to find out a lot more, of course, about this whole unit as we get to training camp and our next conversation, more than likely. But before we move on from wide receiver, look, Hollywood Brown was added to the team. They got to be really excited there. I know he's a little older, but he's not old. He's in the prime of his career, and this could be a very, maybe even underrated, because everybody is, of course, Rice, they was excited about. Worthy, they're all excited about this year. And then here's Hollywood Brown under the radar coming on in, and he could have a monster season.
Yeah.
with Mahomes, especially with the deep ball. So we're going to keep an eye on that. But Sky Moore, before we move on, what's your gut tell you between now and the time that we do talk again? Anything going to change? Do you think your opinion is going to be the same? Or do you think, hey, keep an eye on, I think Sky Moore, maybe this could be a good year for him, and this is the reason why?
Yeah, I think that Sky is always going to have a role that he can play. I don't know that he's ever going to be a star. I don't know he's ever going to be the guy that you're relying on. He's your number one. I think that, it's tough to really say right now because it's just so early.
Okay.
I would reckon that he'll be on the team, and they'll have a role for him. I couldn't tell you what that is yet.
Could they trade him?
I mean, I think that's a possibility too. He could be one of those guys who maybe it's just a change of scenery, a different opportunity. I think, I don't know if it's a matter of expectations, kind of overwhelming him or whatnot. He had, I think, practice that was open to media this week. There was a drop that was mentioned that people were kind of yikes about. they were a little like, ooh. I mean, that could have been one of those plays, but I think he's one of those guys that if he does stick around, I feel like he's going to come up big for the team in a couple moments where they're going to be vindicated for making that decision.
Okay.
I think that he's the type of guy who's going to, thrive as the season progresses and, kind of in the dog days. And, maybe it's just one of those games where they have a couple of guys who are banged up and they need someone who's reliable, who's been in the system, who knows things. And, all of a sudden he gets that great matchup and he goes off for 145 yards and a couple TDs. And suddenly, everyone's singing Sky Moore's praises. Right.
Okay.
But, I think that, he's not someone that I would necessarily move on from yet, even if he does have kind of some yips or a tough off season competing this year.
What's holding him back the most? Is there one thing holding him back the most, or is it just again, it's just a variety of things? And
I think it's a matter of finding just a defined role for him. I think that they kind of initially envisioned him kind of in like that slot type of role, working across the middle of the field, kind of the Juju Smith-Schuster role. And I think that with Rashee Rice kind of stepping in to that role last season, it kind of, put him at a disadvantage. So now it's trying to find, okay, can he, fill in elsewhere? Is he the guy who's going to step in for Rice if Rice is suspended? Can he, become a deep threat? Where can you use some of his route running prowess, and what are the types of routes that he can run that, you need that type of help?
Okay. Want to let everybody know who is watching live. If you have any questions or comments, you can let us know, and then we can, retort and get back and forth there. If you're watching on demand, same thing. It's just not going to be happening live, but we will definitely respond, and I'll forward any questions or comments that you have over to Charles from our Ourlads channel. And he can answer them for you if he wants to. I mean, that's just Charles. He's got a busy schedule. So, all right. So what I did notice about this draft class, seven players. So 3 of those, of course, are the offensive line. But what I also noticed, and we talked about Kingsley already, is that all of these guys have one similar trait, one key similar trait. They're all athletic linemen. And so if you want to know what the Chiefs are looking for in the offensive line, all you have to do is check out the profiles of these 3 linemen, and athlete sticks out more than anything. And where do you find that? Right here in the Ourlads draft guide. So even if you haven't purchased this yet and you're thinking, well, why would I do it if the draft is over? Well, this is the perfect time anyway, because now you know where all these players are, including on your own team. And you have a few that are free agents too. So not only is all 7 of the draft picks in this guide, but you also have several of the free agents that we're going to get into a little bit. The reason I'm talking to Charles at this time is actually because of this. the draft review guide that'll be out in 2024. This is last year's. Not sure who's going to be on the cover yet for 2024. If you have any suggestions, let us know. But this was last year. I'm going to take what Charles is going to give me here, and I am going to add in my own 2 cents and then put my report in the guide. So you can check that out as part of one of 32 team draft reviews that we're going to have. So you can get both the review guide and the draft guide at ourlads.com. Okay, so let's talk about those linemen. You mentioned Kingsley already. And the one thing, I mean, I don't know what you found out about it, but what was that?
I was just going to say, if you recall when we spoke ahead of the draft, I believe I listed offensive line as like my number one need.
Oh, yeah.
And I specifically cited interior offensive line too, with all the departures and the future needs that they had. So
yes,
I wasn't surprised, and anyone who watched that wouldn't have been surprised to kind of see that transpire.
Yeah, matter of fact, let's see, because I put the report out for the Chiefs in the draft review guide, and again, same thing. The information I was able to get from you went in here, and I don't know if they can see it here, but let's see, where is it? Yeah, I'm not sure. It might be too small, but right here, offensive line, top need.
There we go.
So, and I didn't come up with that myself. I'll tell you that right now. So Charles obviously knew what he was talking about, and I was smart enough to put that in there as their number one need. So, all right. So then I wanted to ask you about Kingsley, because when you're doing the extra work on him, you see him as a 5-star, and BYU, it's always a strange kind of deal because you go on these missions and stuff, and your career is interrupted and all that kind of stuff. But but you also see a guy that only started for a couple of years, so you go, well, 5-star. A lot of teams wanted him. Shouldn't he have been starting from day one? This is BYU. This ain't Alabama. Why wasn't this guy maybe more productive? So, but hey, he ended up as a 2nd-round draft pick. So it's not like we're talking about a guy that was a 4th or 5th round guy. It's still, you're a 2nd-round draft pick. You got talent. What did you notice most importantly? Because he's got the power. He has the size. He has the athleticism. So he's got it all. But what do you notice more than anything else regarding the traits that he has that you think is going to be useful to the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, I think, obviously the stuff with, his recruiting and when I think he started at Oregon, then he ended up at BYU, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously he's got the bloodlines, right? He's got his cousin Sewell over in he's got three cousin Sewells in the NFL. I think 2 linebackers and the offensive tackle in Detroit. And then, his grandfather, and so he's got a long history of people playing professional football in his family. So there's that aspect of it. Obviously, Andy Reid, being a BYU alum, he has kind of the inside track to find out about the kid. And
good point. Oh, you froze, Charles. I told you we were having a little minor issues. You okay there, Charles? You coming back?
I think I'm back.
You froze there. Yeah, you're back. Good. Okay. Is everything okay there? You got too many browsers open? What's up?
No, I don't think so. I've been having some Wi-Fi issues lately.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Apologize.
That's okay. You're back.
Anyhow, well, like I was saying, the Chiefs did a lot of homework on Kingsley. And I think they're really comfortable and confident. I mean, there was even some buzz that they might have selected him at the end of the 1st round in a certain scenario, and they get him kind of right there at the end of the 2nd round. And I think they're pretty happy with that. But I think strong athlete obviously is a big thing. He had the really good season at right tackle, then kind of switched to left this last year. That was kind of, a little touch and go. And I know there were some things that went on with the offensive line coach at BYU that there was some I don't know what the right word to say is, but some disagreements and whatnot in the room. And I think that, Kingsley showed enough playing left tackle last year that you feel comfortable that he's a guy who can transition, play that in the pros. And it doesn't hurt that he has the capability to kind of switch and play right tackle,
sure.
Potentially in the future, because you always like to have that flexibility, that ability to, move guys around when necessary. But I think, developmental left tackle of the future is kind of where they're plugging him in right now. And, whether he starts this year or plays kind of a backup role to whoever earns the starting job remains to be seen.
Sure. Yeah. It's going to be a great competition, though. That's those three. Do you seriously say that right now all three of those kids are on equal ground? Do you believe that to be true, or do you think there's a pecking order right now?
I think the offensive line coach, Andy Heck, even admitted this. Obviously Wanya Morris and Kingsley are two guys that would have a step up over some of the others because their draft status, their experience, and what have you. But I don't think they're ready to make those decisions yet. I think they are legitimately going to give guys chances, and regardless of draft status. And I think that goes for really all five spots on the offensive line. And they always are. Saying put the five best guys out there, right? And we'll see if the five best from last year are kind of the five best this year. But it always can be different. There are things that can come into play. Joe Tooney's recovering from the pec injury, so maybe if he's still dealing with some stuff there, maybe you plug someone else in to give him some extra time. Maybe you run into some injury issues during the preseason and you got to plug someone else in there. So, having a good depth of talent, and having some of these other guys who can kind of pop in and out and play a couple different positions. I know specifically the interior offensive line, Hunter Nourzad's a guy that they kind of envision as a Nick Allegretti replacement, a guy who can play left guard, he can play center, he can play right guard.
Oh yeah.
So he has those three interior offensive line positions probably, locked down. And then CJ Hansen is a guy that they really liked as well, that they saw at the East-West Shrine Bowl. And, obviously he's coming from Holy Cross, a smaller school, one that doesn't have many players drafted. In fact, the last time a player from Holy Cross was drafted, it was the Kansas City Chiefs back in I believe 89 or 90, one of those years. So it's a long time, right?
They had another player. I think it was the receiver, maybe.
I don't think he was drafted this year, though.
No, he wasn't drafted, but he's a player that Dave. I know when I was speaking to the insider on that video that he felt this is a guy to watch. Yeah. So must have been a big season for Holy Cross last year.
Yeah, I think it's Coker, I think is his name.
Yes, Coker, correct.
Yeah. Yep. So, anyhow, but I think that, these two guys, can be kind of those backup interior offensive linemen this season. And potentially when they have some departures, I don't know that they're going to pay a guy like Trey Smith the market rate for guards after this past off season. I don't know that, Creed Humphrey, that's also another guy who's going to be paid at top of market. So do you pay both those guys? That's, a question. Joe Tooney's going to be coming up on a contract year in 2025. So do you extend him? Do you find, someone else? So, they're going to have some decisions to make there, and how some of these guys perform, some of the draft picks perform, and even some of the undrafted free agents could potentially, be something interesting there. Another thing I found interesting, Griffin McDowell, who you have at left tackle, I think he transitioned. He played tight end, and then at Florida, and then he transferred to Chattanooga. And he played tackle at Chattanooga. The Chiefs are playing him at center. Have been playing him at center, and he kind of has a similar athletic profile and build as former Chiefs center Mitch Morris, who's now with the Buffalo Bills. So that's a developmental guy that I worthy of watching as maybe like one of those guys who could, maybe stick around the practice squad, is still pretty raw, learning a position, and then, a year from now be a very valuable depth piece, or even slot in as, a surprising starter.
Okay. So, and you mentioned, so we got McDowell, Torres, Meta-Hour,
yeah,
and then Driscoll. So
Driscoll is an interesting player too. I mean, he's someone who's getting some shots in the tackle competition on the left side. He's also playing some right tackle as well. Mid-Hour obviously comes from the Oklahoma tree there, and the Chiefs tend to really like their offensive linemen from Oklahoma. Torres, very intriguing athlete, played tackle, I believe, for Villanova, and now they're sliding him in at guard. So, I mean, they have a lot of depth there, a lot of obviously new players. I mean, you can see just from looking at your depth chart here, a lot of orange in the offensive line room. Compared to some of these other positions. So, that's something that you worry. You don't worry so much about it though, when you know that you've had some good success bringing up some of these rookies quickly, with guys like Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith in the past. So I think it's going to be that's going to be a fun room to watch. I'm really interested to see who ends up kind of settling in as that second string offensive line, even behind the starters, because that can really kind of tell you, who they're looking at as, that there's potential depth players for the future.
Yeah, matter of fact, there was a scouting report in the draft guide on Driscoll. So he had a projected potential round of the fifth, as high as the fifth. So they thought he could have been a fifth-round draft pick. And
Brett Veach agreed. He said that they were actually considering him late in the draft, and round 6, round 7. That's when they started kind of thinking, hey, is this like a guy that we go and draft right now? Right? He was someone who was kind of highly rated on their board, and was one of the priority free agents that they really were happy that they were able to get.
Big dude.
Yeah, 6'9". He's a big guy.
Wow. Okay. So there you go. So I believe those are the two guys. Well, so if I had to really just point at 2 of the 4, look, I mean, it could be all 4, but we try to bring it down a little bit. But if just saying, not everybody is a realistic roster guy. But would you say Driscoll, McDowell would be the top 2 out of those 4?
Yeah, I would say those would be the top 2 to watch out of those 4. Okay. The 4 undrafted free agents right now.
Okay. All right. So that is the offensive line, which again took a lot of what this draft was about. We now stay on offense for one more pick, and that's Jared Wiley. And I'll say this: I had it in my mind for quite a long time during my rookie draft, our first one actually in the Dynasty League that we started last year. Hey, you know what? I need a developmental tight end guy on my team, and I think Wiley would be really perfect. And I just never got around to taking him, but it was somebody I was really thinking about. And actually, the guy that did take him, who is the editor over at the Falcoholic, Kevin Knight, who covers the Atlanta Falcons, he has Travis Kelce on his team. So he took Jared Wiley. So that made a lot of sense for his dynasty team. But I mention that only because of the fact that if you look at it, he didn't get the name recognition, obviously, of some of the other players like Brock Bowers and so forth. We get that. And it's not like he made a name for himself in college. Get that. But when you just looked at it, he was like, hey, you know what? This guy looks like he's somebody that is exactly what you're looking for as far as an ascending player with his best football ahead of him that could fit really nicely into maybe being the guy that does take over for Travis Kelce whenever that is.
Yeah, and I think you kind of look at them and they come from it's a similar background, right? Former quarterback turned tight end. it seems like they're very much so cut from the same cloth. And you know, I look at Wiley, and I feel like, you know, he might be the one who benefits most from a Rashee Rice suspension, because I wonder if the Chiefs won't maybe run a little bit more 12 personnel when, you know, they don't have Rashee Rice, and you know, you get a guy like Travis Kelce and a guy like Jared Wiley on the field at the same time. That's, you know, I feel like there's a lot of potential with that type of look. And you know, what we're hearing from you know, OTAs about Wiley is that, you know, he's coming from a system this last year, and mind you, he had 5 different offenses that he had to learn during the course of his college career. So this is his 6th offense that he's learned in the last 6 years. However, this last offense at TCU has a lot of similar concepts.
Okay.
To what the Chiefs run. There's just a lot of different terminology. So it's kind of rewiring your brain. Like, you already know how to do this, but you got to remember that it's not called, you know, a banana, it's called an orange, you know, yeah, right?
Sure.
Like,
yeah, much easier. Yes.
Right. So it's just it's one of those things that you know, with time, he's getting faster. He's getting able to kind of regurgitate that information quicker and move quicker. And, you know, I think by the end of camp that he's a guy that could really sprout and, you know, potentially be right behind Travis Kelce on the depth chart there.
Yeah. And this is important to note, taking a look at the stats from last year, that the Chiefs were one of the top teams that combined to run both 12 and 13 personnel. So I believe they ran about 12% 13, 27% 12. And of course, 13 is 3 tight ends and 12 is 2. So they use multiple tight ends quite a bit compared to a lot of other teams in the league. And also maybe not a surprise that Irv Smith was also brought on board as a veteran who just has never been able to live up to the hype with injuries and so forth. So yeah, it should be also a very interesting tight end competition with Smith, Wiley, and Gray.
Right. And I do see a situation where maybe they keep all 4, right? Obviously, the new kick return rules, we mentioned them earlier. They're going to have a lot of different players who can play different roles, whether it's, you know, on the return team or the coverage team. And, you know, they're not necessarily the same types of players that they were formerly looking for, you know, with the old kickoffs, right? You're looking for, you know, players who can get down the field quickly and whatnot. Now you need guys who can stack and shed blocks and, you know, and can move guys off of their spot and whatnot. So, you know, you have a play that's looking a lot more like run blocking versus play that has, you know, a lot of these smaller guys trying to get down the field as quickly as possible. So you're going to need different types of players. So maybe you keep one less cornerback and you keep one extra tight end. That's, you know, there's definitely potential for, you know, different ways to organize your roster now that this new rule is in place.
Oh yeah, that's everybody's talking about regarding how it could be. How do you take advantage of it? And I'm not sure. It's be interesting to find out after the fact what some of these coaches say, because everybody's saying we don't know what to expect, and I know most of those people are media. We don't know what to expect, but you do get. I mean, look, this is their job. That's what they do every day, every second. Devise ways, and if you got it, okay, this is what I understand that we can do. This is what they tell us. These are the new rules. These guys, they know. It's just a matter of who's going to be the one to be more creative about it and take advantage of it. And we're the ones that are going to have no idea until we see a first game, maybe even, of course, in the preseason before we kind of, oh, that's what it looks like. Oh, that's what they've been talking. That's how, now I understand. And maybe we'll start getting some of that in the preseason. Before I move on from the offense, let's just talk about these running backs as well, because I know they didn't draft any. But I think it's important, especially if there are any dynasty fans out there. You're probably not going to take these guys, of course, in their draft, but keep an eye on them in the preseason. You might want to snatch one if all of a sudden they've had a really good summer, they're having a really good camp, and we're talking about Bailey and Steele. Even though Bailey is the one maybe to watch more, Bailey, the Ourlads had him graded as a 5th round talent. So he's in this. He's got a scout. We got a scouting report of him in the guide. What I noticed from him, even though he's only 5'7", he was top 10 nationally in missed tackles forced. He's got excellent hands, and that's a room that when you see Clyde Edwards-Helaire as the number 2 running back, and you know Pacheco's injury history because of how hard he runs. Not that he's injury prone or, he's one of those guys. Just that we all know he just runs so violently that he's going to miss games here and there. And so that number 2 job is really important. And after Prince was the talk last year, and then even you take a look at this class that's coming in, I think Bailey and/or Steele, they have legitimate chances to make this team. And if one of them really just makes their mark, they could be part of the rotation.
Yeah. I was just talking about this room with Craig Stout, formerly of KC Sports Network. He just kind of retired from his main role over there. But I was talking to him over lunch today about this room. And it's so interesting because you've got Pacheco at the top, 7th round draft pick. You got Clyde, 1st round draft pick, and everybody else, undrafted free agents. I think Ingram is like a 5th round pick, and then you got Reese Sammet, who is like never played football before, international player, right? It's just a very weird room. I think it kind of reflects like the climate surrounding running backs a little bit, though, and how they've become devalued. I do think, the name to move up a little bit right now, Deneric Prince, again, he's taken like some first team, second team reps in OTAs. So, that's a guy who they liked a lot last year. He sat on the bench. He was called up for 2 games. He played about 12 snaps on special teams, no snaps on offense, but he did everything the coaches asked of him. And, now I feel like, you get a year like that where you're sitting on the bench a lot. And now you're kind of getting rewarded for it with an opportunity. And I think, obviously in OTAs, he took advantage of that opportunity last year. There was a lot of hype coming out of his pass catching ability and whatnot. And I think, can you recreate that hype in a training camp environment once the pads come on? Because I do think he's going to get an opportunity to still have that first, second team type role and get in there and work in there. Beyond that, Keontae Ingram is a guy who obviously the Chiefs brought on late last year on the practice squad. Played with the Cardinals for a little bit, former running back out of USC, someone that the Chiefs liked when he's coming out of the draft. I know Brett Veach is still very high on him, spoke highly of him after the draft as a guy who could potentially fit in there. I think that, what we've seen over the years from the Chiefs, last year, they were content with cutting Deneric Prince and letting him chance it on waivers and signing him to the practice squad eventually. I think for guys like Steele and Bailey, unless they really, really have a standout camp, I think that's the path they're on right now. I really do. I think they're going to, chance it with releasing them, figuring out which one they can get on the practice squad. And boom. I feel like for a guy like Reese Sammet, is he going to be ready to play running back super early? I don't know, but he's got some crazy value for this team right now. They're using him in so many different ways. They've got him as kicking off as a kicker, right? They've got him kicking off as a kicker.
Okay.
Right? They've got him returning kicks and punts, and they've got him working in receiver and running back. So they're working him a lot. And mind you, he's taking first team repetitions as the kick and punt returner because they want him to get as many repetitions as possible.
Interesting.
They're seeing him as someone who can potentially be a bit of a cheat code with the new kick return rules and whatnot. Okay. And someone who obviously he hasn't played a lot of football before, right? But no one has played with these new kick return rules before. So getting him as a mainstay in that, he's on the same level as everybody else, even though he hasn't played football his whole life, like most everyone else on the football team has. He's someone who's on that same level when he's out there, whether it's, kick coverage, whether he's kicking off, whether he's acting as a returner or blocking and whatnot. So I think he's a guy, like, if they end up keeping like 4 running backs on the 53-man roster, I think he's a guy who could be that number 4 guy.
Interesting. Okay. Now let's, by the way, just Steele had over 3,200 yards rushing in 3 years. 2 of those with Ball State, 26 touchdowns, 58 receptions. And I know he also I believe he has fumbling problems. I know that.
He's got a pet alligator named Crocky J. That's all I need to know about
him. And he has a pet alligator. So maybe that's all you need to know, right?
Right.
All right. So we'll see how that works out. And who knows, if Prince doesn't work out or Ingram doesn't work out this year, then next year maybe Bailey and Steele will be in their shoes during camp. So like you said, makes a lot of sense. Prince and Ingram, they're a little bit older, so they've got pro experience, and they should be. That's why it's a depth chart. They're ahead of them for a reason. And as long as Prince and Ingram continue to play well enough to hold on to those roles, that's probably what will happen. Okay. But by the way, last thing, Prince definitely, you give him a really good shot to be the number 2 running back this year.
I think there's a possibility that he could jump in that number 2 spot. I think it's going to come down to pass protection. Can he pass protect better than Clyde? And whether or not he can get those run concepts down.
Okay.
To a T, because it wasn't there last year with the run game.
All right. Now on defense, there were a couple of players that they added, and they were both in the secondary. So you had Hicks and Hayden coming in. Hicks was somebody that could have gone as early as round 2. So matter of fact, I believe 4 or 5 players that the Chiefs drafted, Ourlads felt could have gone earlier, a couple of rounds earlier. So that's good. That's really good drafting when you can get guys a round or 2 later than expected. And Hicks is one of them. So the thing with Hicks is his versatility. He's got a good size for the position, which you like for either position. Do you think that they have like a specific role for him already, or are they just going to use that versatility and say, okay, let's just use him, and the versatility is basically going to give us an opportunity to disguise our defenses better that way?
Yeah, I think they do have a role in mind. It's going to be interesting. Dave Merritt described him as the prototype safety for the team the other day. However, he also kind of admitted, and as did Steve Spagnuolo, that he's still got to get the playbook down and whatnot. That's kind of the part of it and where he's at right now. I think they believe he's got the athletic ability and he's got everything between the ears that they need. It's just a matter of mastering that part of it. And that'll come down to how quickly he can kind of contribute there. I just think it's interesting, Shamari Connor, who you have listed as strong safety here. He's a guy who's playing nickel now.
He is. Okay.
He's playing nickel. He's playing the slot for the Chiefs. He's kind of their number 1 guy and has been this year. And I think that's kind of interesting. He's kind of more of not as outspoken, kind of a quieter guy. And I think that's, potentially one of the reasons that they're moving him to nickel is because they're guys in the safety room to be outspoken. They need their guys to be loud because they really control the defense for Steve Spagnuolo. So
okay,
the fact of the stuff surrounding the kick return rules, I keep coming back to this, right? Justin Reed right now is doing kickoffs. He's their number 1 kickoff guy. No longer Harrison Butker. It's Justin Reed doing kickoffs for the Chiefs. With this new kickoff rules, which is great. They want to have an extra tackler on the field. They don't want to have a guy like Butker having to get into 20 to 30% of the plays where the kicker is going to have to tackle a guy with these new rules. So
that's legit.
That's legit.
They legitimately right now. Justin Reed is the number 1 kickoff guy for this team.
He is the number 1 kickoff guy for this team. They're still going to use Butker, I think, in certain situations, like if they are at the end of the game and say they don't want to risk a kickoff return, they want to take a touchback and, surrender the extra 5 yards that you do by, kicking a touchback. They'll bring Butker out because he's got the leg to boot it. I mean, Justin does too, but I think they'll still use Butker in certain situations, but I think Justin's one of those main guys. And, with having him on all those plays, that, brings up another opportunity. Okay, maybe Hicks can slot in and play a little bit more early alongside Brian Cook, who's, coming back from injury. He looks really good, by the way, coming back from injury. You got Trey Dean, who's also taking reps with the second team. You've got Deion Bush, who they trust very much so. I think this could be a team that sees a lot of safeties making the roster, to be honest with you.
Well, you talked about the kid, Boydo.
How
you pronounce his name?
Yes, Boydo. Yeah.
Boydo.
As a cornerback. And also a special teamer. He's good. A punt gunner.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. It sounds like that is one area that other teams are going to be looking at and find out, all right, who are the Chiefs going to cut or who are they going to leave vulnerable in the practice squad? That's how it works. Okay. Right. So, and then the other kid, Kamal Haddon. So Haddon coming over just 1 year as a starter, but that's because his, he started, then last year he had the injury, and it was bad timing because he was just really starting. Yeah, he was just starting to get it.
Yeah, he was really good last season, the games he played. And, I think the Chiefs kind of envision him as a developmental type, someone they can kind of bring along and potentially have, I think Dave Merritt, he compared him to Bashad Breeland, who the Chiefs had for several seasons. He was part of the Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl team, the LIV team. But I think that press is something that he's going to have to work on, something he's going to have to learn. But he's someone who's definitely intriguing. Another cornerback that I can put on your radar, Kelvin Joseph, who's the former second-round pick by the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah,
he was getting some first-team action recently. He saw him getting second-team action that first week, and he's kind of, I think, proven himself enough that they're giving him some earlier reps there, which is interesting because, obviously he's got the second-round pedigree. So, that's fascinating. But we'll see.
Okay, that's awesome. And look, this is definitely the time of year where it happens. But they're just not going to stick guys into those spots just to do it. They've obviously seen something in these kids and why they're giving them these opportunities. And we'll see if they can take advantage of it. Okay.
Right. And there's a couple of guys too. I mean, Brian Cook hasn't seen the field yet. He's coming back from the ankle injury. Najee Johnson coming back from the knee injury. Those are guys that I fully expect to be right in the mix for starting jobs. Cook especially, but Najee last year he was tracking to start, opposite Snead and McDuffie. So that's a guy who could, if he comes back and he trusts his knee and is back in the swing of things. I mean, he's a guy who can make some noise too.
Okay. So first, I just want to, because I didn't ask you for a grade. I don't think you gave a grade, right? You might have given it to me off the air, but we both feel that they've had a good draft. Did you give them an A minus?
A minus, yeah. That was I believe my grade. I'm sticking with that. I think it's a really, really great draft class. They played the board nicely. I know fans probably would have liked to see, interior defensive line at some point or, another wide receiver. But I just think they really went for value and got some really great value, especially day 3. They really got a lot of good guys.
Yeah, and I can't remember if it was, I think it was A minus that I gave for them as well, because I actually, Mark Lawrence, who does his annual playbook guide that comes out every year. It's a handicapping guide, but it's excellent for the NFL and college football. You should definitely, if you're a gambler and you just like to get some really good information that you can use in a magazine form, he does a great job. You can check that out over at playbooksports.com. Anyway, because of our relationship, he asked me for grades. He was putting something together on his on his magazine, and so I'm pretty sure. And I hadn't done grades at that point, but I went ahead and I'm pretty sure my grade. Matter of fact, let me look at it right here. Yep, it's Kansas City A-. And a matter of fact, again, I had every team in the AFC West got at least an A-. That's how strong I felt. I don't know about you, but I felt that every team in the AFC West did good during the draft. So, okay. A couple more things before I let you go. And what do you think? Are there any other players that you think that the Chiefs are going to add to the team or could add to the team or position-wise? Like, because there are some players that are still available, of course, in free agency. Is there a position or a player that you could see the team maybe adding before the start of the season?
I mean, they have some cap space. They could, maybe if they feel like they're weak or at a certain spot or they have an injury during training camp or something that kind of shakes things up, they could certainly go out and make a trade or find, someone who's maybe a late cut, veteran, something like that. But I think right now they're kind of comfortable just letting guys compete. I'd be surprised if there were any really big ads. I'm sure they'll have a couple tryout guys at their early portion of training camp, or maybe one or two signings if someone who's kind of fallen to the wayside or something happens.
Okay.
I think one more thing I'll talk about before letting you go: the punter battle. That's something to keep an eye on. With Tommy Townsend's no longer there, so. You've got punt god Matt Araiza, and you've got Ryan from BYU, and Dave Tobe said it's a real close battle, and we'll see who comes out on top. I think it's going to come down to the little things. It's going to come down to holding and who Harrison Butker likes in that role best. It's going to come down to can some of these guys run like a fake? Can they execute some of the fakes that they like? Because Tommy's a guy who threw 4 passes. He threw a fake pass in games every single year, basically. So, they do like to run fakes with their punters. And, Matt Araiza is a guy, I think he ran 1 or 2 in college for San Diego State. I don't know much about whether or not Ryan did, but, it could come down to something as minuscule or minute, or I guess we view it that way, or I view it that way, right? It might not come down to the fact that Araiza can punt the ball out of the stadium. It might just come down to something simple like that.
Well, as a Jet fan, of course, the Jets were the first team to take a real serious look at him while he was still in limbo. And then they even looked at him, and it was like, oh, are they going to add him to the team? But they got this more. And look, when you're a fan, you're like, come on, are they really sticking with the 35-year-old punter journeyman over this kid, giving him a chance with his talent? He could be a Pro Bowler for the next 15 years. Yep. That's the kind of feeling that you have as a Jet fan when letting this guy walk out of the building. And then, of course, he signs with the Chiefs of all teams. You're thinking, oh, of course, the Super Bowl team gets the most talented punter to come out in college.
Here's the thing. Maybe they go with the other kid, the BYU kid, and they let Matt walk, and suddenly you have another chance at him. And that could be the case. I mean, they might do that, but then another thing to consider too is that Matt was a place kicker also.
Yes.
In college, so that's another guy who can play the place kicker or kick off as well. So having the ability to do different things, that sometimes can come and play a big role. So we'll see. Maybe they want to keep him around for his ability to kick too. Who knows?
Yeah, because and by the way, Ray Cow was a little bit of a write up in the draft guide, 4-year starter, and talked about the fact that he does have a good power leg, but the hang time, that's the question, is whether or not he's got the hang time that teams or the Chiefs would be looking for. But they say his placement and consistency are NFL ready, so should be a very interesting competition to take a look at as well. Okay. And then, so the college free agents they signed, again, Bailey and Steele, just because skill positions, that they've got stats and the position is open. So I've got those guys. We talked about Driscoll, McDowell on the offensive line, Rakow at punter. Is there any other college free agents that you would say you believe could make this roster?
A linebacker, a guy like Curtis Jacobs out of Penn State. I think he was highly regarded, someone that a lot of people thought would be drafted.
There's a write up in the guide on him. Absolutely.
Yeah. Fabian Lovett Sr., the defensive tackle, I think is another guy to kind of watch. The Chiefs have a lot of veterans in the defensive line room, but they don't have a lot of young guys. I know they like Neil Farrell Jr. because they traded for him last season, but he didn't get a lot of opportunities last season. So I wonder, does he take a step up this next year? Is he someone? Obviously, Isaiah Buggs has some off-field stuff going on right now, so I don't know if he's long for the roster. But a guy like Fabian Lovett, someone who could maybe surprise and jump up in there, and maybe he's someone who is your fifth or sixth interior guy if you keep that many.
Yeah, matter of fact, Lovett also. Because he had a potential 5th round grade as a 4-year starter in college football, transferred from Mississippi State to FSU, team captain, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got write-ups on Lovett, and then Jacobs was a 4th round.
Right. He's a little older, Lovett. So I think that was one of the reasons that he kind of fell out of the draft.
Okay.
Because NFL teams tend to be a little bit ageist, so to speak. But
we understand that, yes.
Right. But I think there's obviously some talent there that they can harness.
Absolutely.
The Chiefs love having 6-7 linebackers for whatever reason. I don't know that you necessarily need them, but and they like their undrafted free agents. Jack Cochran, Cam Jones are guys that they've kind of slotted in, had on the roster, and they got 3 guys this year who they're all athletic and talented in their own right, but I think Jacobs is probably the eye-popping guy.
Yeah, I mean, out of all the interviews I've done with the teams that I'm responsible for in the guide, the Chiefs have just as much, if not more, players that were signed in free agency after the draft that had draftable grades than just about any team. That, again, I haven't gone through 32, but just my teams. And that's interesting considering this is the Super Bowl team,
right.
Back-to-back Super Bowl team that you would think.
It's nice because they have that, that Super Bowl that they can, here's our 4 Super Bowl trophies that they can show these guys when they bring them in for pre-draft visits or whatever, or even, I'm sure there's someone, if they're on a Zoom call or whatnot, they'll take the laptop down to the Hall of Honor and show them. But, they have that to hang their hat on. But this year, one thing they had that they haven't had recently during priority free agency is money. They had a lot more cap space and a lot more money they could kind of throw around. So I think they were able to really, be like, hey, we want you to come here. Sure. Other teams want you, but we want you more, and we're going to prove it with our checkbook. So
hey,
I think that was that played a part this year for sure.
And maybe it makes sense too, because when you're a Super Bowl team, everybody wants your players, and you lose guys. And when you lose guys, there are spots open at the end of those depth charts, and then this is where you replenish them. And that's what we led off the show talking about. That's what you have to do. To keep putting out teams that are competing for Super Bowl championships. Before I let you leave, the last thing is the schedule. So what did you think? What was the fans' reaction to the schedule for getting the Ravens kick things off on week 1 at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you saw last year the kind of, up and coming team was the one who you got in week 1. I think they're happy and okay with this being their team. I think they're a little bit more familiar with the Ravens than they were with the Lions. I think they're in general just more familiar with the AFC. And I think, if you start off hot, you could wrap up the number 1 seed pretty early, right? And I think that's got to be what they're thinking, knocking off some of this top AFC competition early, really before they get rolling, right? Because early in the season, teams have some hiccups and what have you. So if they can get off to a hot start, if they're looking at a 4-1 or a 5-0 heading into week 6, they're going to be thrilled because they have a tough late schedule. Oop, I got someone out front.
You need to get that?
I don't think so.
So, just quickly going over this. See, this is the reason why I think schedules going too deep into this just is a waste of time. Because if you look here, you got Atlanta, the Chargers, and the Saints back-to-back before the bye. Now, on one hand, maybe those are teams that sort of like last year, they were all just non-playoff teams, and maybe they're around 500, maybe they're not. Or maybe all 3 teams are playoff teams this year. You don't know. So that's why it's just an unknown. You could just immediately look at this and go, wow, that's a pretty good run. That should be definitely 3 wins in a row right there after a really tough start, as long as, of course, Joe Burrow is healthy. That's the way that you can look at it. But it's just crazy to kind of think ahead of what's going to happen. And especially with all the injuries happened in the AFC at quarterback, nobody predicted that, and you can never predict that from year to year. But the key,
I think the crazy thing, I think it's from like week 8 onward. I want to say it's week 8 onward. I think they play every single game in an outdoor stadium, in like cold weather temperatures. It's week 9 on, I believe. No, it's week 8 on. Yeah, because week 9 is an Arrowhead.
So week 10, you got Denver, Buffalo, Carolina, and then you got you talking about cold temperature games?
Yeah.
Okay. Look at that. Pittsburgh. That's the second to last game of the season. And Denver, the last game. And that team and that stadium has actually been a tough venue.
Yeah.
For Kansas City recently.
I think, everyone assumes that like week 5 to week 7.
You still there, Charles? Charles, his Wi-Fi is just barely hanging on.
Are we back?
Yeah, we're back.
We're back.
What were we saying, Charles?
We got 3 games in 11 days, 10 days. 3 games,
okay.
11 days, 10 days.
I think 5 teams or 6 teams in the NFL are going through that this year. Yes.
Yeah.
When is that?
It's a tough slate starting week 15.
Okay.
So you've got Cleveland on that Sunday.
Okay.
And then you've got Houston on the Saturday, and then you play the Wednesday game against the Steelers.
Wednesday game.
Yeah.
Oh, Christmas. Wednesday. Okay.
Yep. So, and that's just, it's a tough stretch. I mean, obviously, Houston and Cleveland, those are 2 really good AFC teams. Steelers are expected, they always play well.
Oh, yeah.
And, the Chiefs don't typically play great. I mean, the Patrick Mahomes era has been different, but they don't typically play great at Pittsburgh. Just historically, they haven't. And, they're getting them on Christmas Day in, week 17. Could be a wintry game. You never know.
Yeah. And it could be a huge game, you would think, for Pittsburgh, because that division is just going to be so entertaining to watch. And really, the AFC West, I think, could be that way as well. You have the Raiders looking like they have the potential if the quarterback comes through. And, the Chargers are just going to be better. That's just,
I've always been of the opinion that, coaching is the biggest thing in the NFL, and, immediately coaching upgrade with Harbaugh there.
Yep. So the divisions, who are the 2 divisions they have this year?
I want to say, what is it? AFC North and the
NFC South.
NFC South. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And how many prime timers? I see the Bucks here on Monday night.
I want to say it's like 5 true primetime games, and then they have the 2, the Christmas Day and the
Friday.
Black Friday game. Yeah.
Okay, you got the Friday Raider game there, and you got the Brown game is on a Sunday, but Saturday Houston, and then Wednesday Pittsburgh. Yeah, so yeah, and then there's that San Francisco game. There's that rematch with San Francisco right after the bye. So
Right.
That's of course going to be entertaining. And we'll keep an eye on San Francisco. Mark my words. This is something. Speaking of Mark Lawrence, Mark is going to do. He's a legendary handicapper. We do games. We do previews each week. We'll continue to do that on the Ourlads channel this year. And one of the things that we will talk about, because we talk about it every year when we're making our predictions, is every team that is coming off a loss in the Super Bowl, for the most part, has an issue the next year somehow, whether it's a hangover. The only teams that usually survive that are teams with just, they're just elite, like Tom Brady elite, or Patrick Holmes say elite, that kind of thing. Sorry, but San Francisco's just not that. They're very good, but they're not elite. They're not that. They don't fit that category. Just look at Philadelphia last year. If there was another 2 weeks of the season, they probably don't even make the playoffs. That's how they were just about to fall apart. So every Super Bowl champion loser has issues, and so keep an eye on that with San Francisco. Not that Chiefs fans care, but just
I think the biggest thing for the Eagles last year was the fact that they lost their coordinators. Right,
absolutely.
That was a tough change to go through.
Yep.
I don't know that there was that much turnover in San Francisco on their coaching staff. So I think they won't
defense.
Have that.
That's it. Coordinator. That's all.
Yeah. So I think, obviously there will be some, a bit of a learning curve there and whatnot with the new DC and some new personnel. But I think, so long as Shanahan's there, they'll still be competitive.
Yeah. It's just a matter of, I guess, normally it's one of those things where something comes up, whether it's, injuries or just bad luck, whatever. But it's hard to lose the Super Bowl one year and come back and then get back or even improve upon that. It's not that, again, it's not that it doesn't happen. It's just that it's hard to do.
It's hard to buck history in the NFL. I mean, the Chiefs are going for it with the three-peat attempt this year. So we'll see if they can become the ones.
Yeah. I mean, the Bengals, Joe Burrow, they did it. But again, I think Joe Burrow I think he's elite. And sorry, Brock Purdy's not elite. I think we saw that Super Bowl Sunday. That's the difference. Chiefs had Mahomes and San Francisco had Purdy. And I think that's what it all came down to. So anyway, that's going to wrap it up. Charles, appreciate it as always. And even though our always will look a lot more like a real always in a few years, but I appreciate it definitely for the few times that you've been on so far, and I'm sure we're going to make it many more. And we'll be back in the training camp preseason kind of window to talk more about the team. We'll have a much better grasp on what's going on, but appreciate all the information. I'm sure Tucker, our draft guru, our depth chart guru, is going to go ahead and make those changes immediately that you recommended. So that's another thing we appreciate. And again, check out the draft review guide. This is last year's, but the 2024 version will be out in a few weeks. I've got a week to finish my reports, and then you can get those either in PDF or hard copy form. So check that out at ourlads.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you're a Chief fan, this way you'll be alerted for when we do this again. So Charles, appreciate it. You're going to be on, what's your next appearance somewhere, or what's you got content coming out sometime soon? What's next?
Well, whatever I have planned, you can always just follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at GoldMCTNFL. It'll all be there, whatever it is, whether it's a podcast, a written article, who knows? Who knows what I'm up to? Maybe I'll star. Maybe I'll star in a commercial with Travis Kelce. You never know.
Okay, well, that's another story. And by the way, we didn't even not that we're going to, but we didn't even talk about the Harrison Butker story. How about that?
Well,
we went through a video.
We did talk about the fact that he might lose his kickoff job because of the new kick return rules.
Yeah,
but,
and that's because we all know he's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
that's why. It's just a silly conversation to have. Yeah. So, all right, Charles, great job. Thank you. And we'll talk to you again, hopefully in a couple of months. Can't wait.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Greg.
You got it.